Good evening, folks.
Good evening.
Good evening. Glad everyone could come tonight for this, for lack of a better word, workshop. By the way, I'm John Blodgett, chairman of the board here, for you folks who don't know me. I've talked to a few people over the past year or so about the communication and the coordination between the school boards and select boards, and former select board members, former school board members say it's never been done, they don't do it. So why not? Why don't we do it? So if nothing else, hopefully we can learn something from each other in the next hour or so. About what we do and how we do things in the town, how you do things at the school. Because we're obviously here for one goal, is to help out our kids in school as well as our residents in the town. Start off by pledge allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to do is start off with some introductions. So we can all know who we are, and some of us know who some people are, some people don't know who other people are. And I, like I said, I'm currently the chair of the board. And this is my going on my second year on the board of selectmen, select people. And I'm born and raised here in Waldoboro, a product of RSU at the former SAD 40. Went away for about 21 years from the military, came back and came right back into town and been involved with some form of town business over the past 20 years since I've been retired from the military. Fire department, budget committee, select board. Trying to keep involved, keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the town, because that's kind of been ingrained in my head since birth of my father. Some people I know my father, Bill Blodgett. Again, I'm very happy to be here with you folks, because I'd like to learn a little bit about the school board and how things work. Bob?
I'm Bob Butler. I'm from away. Maybe I've already here from the start. I grew up in northern Minnesota in a mining town. When our high school was built in 1921, it cost $3.5 million in $21. To do that again today would cost $500 million. The community I grew up in valued education, was a big part of everything we did. Immigrants were educated. We had Italians who basically built the school. They were Italian craftspeople. And it was just, it still is an amazing building. I was back there for the class reunion in June, and it hasn't changed a bit. It's amazing to see. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I've been on the board, 11 years now. So it's been a privilege. I really am lucky to have this job.
And for the record, Bob was not in the first graduating class of that school.
No. Thank you. Point taken.
I'm Mike Thayer. I too am from away. I spent most of my career in Massachusetts. Doing water and sewer, almost all sewer. But I worked for the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. And I took the process, the show on the road that we developed in Massachusetts, and took it around to several other communities, most notably the city of Detroit, where the largest single sludge processing facility in the world was built by my company. The company I worked for was my company. A lot of experience, Brian, in construction.
I'm Becky Stevens. I guess in terms of Waldoboro, I'm from away. Grew up in Midcoast, Maine, but moved to Waldoboro about 4.5 years ago. I worked for RSU 40, so that puts me in a unique category. I did spend 10 years on the school board when I lived in Lincolnville, so I got a little bit of knowledge of what you guys go through to put things together, although I imagine each district does it a little bit differently. That's about all. I'm the PT for the district, and as somebody who went to college, grad school in their 30s with 4 teenage kids, I value education, and think we need to inspire our young people to chase whatever their passion is.
Adam Simmons. I am also a lifelong resident of Waldeboro. My mother was in the first class to graduate from Madonic Valley. She was the first class to graduate from there. I graduated in '89 and my son graduated in 2010. I've been here for 52 of the 53 years of my livelihood life. The only year I was gone was when I was looking for a house to buy. Actually moved into the house my father grew up in Noblesboro. And I've been on the select board for my 10th year. I've served on the Shellfish Committee for pushing 30 years. I served on the planning board for 6 years. So I think I've been heavily invested in the town. I've had a business for the last 28 years in town. I've done a lot of projects with the Madonic River as far as water quality. It's probably the cleanest it's been in probably 25, 30 years. We had a 5-year project where we cleaned up the river. It's cleanest it's been in forever. And a lot of these projects that I've been involved in, especially with the Shellfish Committee, it's never been done in the state of Maine, literally never been done. And the projects we've done, the state of Maine now, the Department of Marine Resources uses our projects that we've done here across the state. I'm very proud of that.
Ben Stickney. I'm from St. George originally. I'm a product of S8050 back when that was a thing. My wife is from Hope. We've lived around the mid-coast for a few years before we settled in Waldeboro about 8 years ago. Bought a house, had a kid, and just doing the family thing. I'm a new member of the school board. This is my first year. So if we're going to be talking about budget processes and stuff, I haven't sat through a budget cycle yet, but I'll be interested to see what everyone has to say and hear from people who've been through that circus more than once.
I'm Leah Ships. I grew up in Central Maine, left after college, lived in Arizona for 12 years, and then came back and moved to Waldeboro in 2021. And I have 2 kids in the school district, which is why I'm interested in the school district and its success. And also just being a member of the community and knowing what an important part of a community the schools are. Like Ben, this is my first year, so I don't have experience in the budget season, but just happy to be here and work together.
Danny Jackson, I guess you can say I'm from away. But lived in Waldeboro 55 of 59 years. Graduated with John in 83 from Madonic. I joined the school board in 2006. There were 5 members at the time. There were 4 open positions. And I took a 1-year position in case I didn't like it. I only had to stick with it for a year. So I'm 18 years later. I'm still here. I've been chair of the board probably at least 10 years. So.
I'm Melvin Williams, the farmer down in South Waldeboro. Most of you know me or have seen me, and I'm here to cause hate and discontent.
It's a nice start, Melvin. Thanks for that.
I'm not professional.
I'm Steve Nolan. I'm the superintendent of schools. I'm in my 11th year as a superintendent now. And when I came here 11 years ago, I felt it was important to be a part of the community. So shortly after, we started looking for a home, and we bought a home in Waldeboro almost 10 years ago. I've lived here ever since, and I'm just happy to be part of the community and trying to make a difference for our kids and everyone involved.
Right. Hi, I'm Brian Race. I've been with the district for 5 years now, so I'm the facilities and transportation director.
Karen Pike, business manager. I'm a Mainer, but not from here. My background's corporate. I was corporate accountant for 30 years before I'm a farmer.
Donkeys and cows, right?
Cows, yeah, cattle, yeah.
I'm Jamison, and I'm the town clerk, and I'm a Mainer. Grew up in West Rockport and have lived in Waldeboro for 25 years. Put kids through the system. Yeah.
I'm Peg Tynan. I'm the finance director for Waldeboro.
I've been here almost 8 years. Also, I think I have a year on you, 26 years in Waldeboro, put kids through school here, but I was born and raised outside of New York City and did private accounting and also early childhood education. So mixed background. I worked at Miller School when we first moved to Waldeboro. That was really awesome to have the same schedule as your children because they do grow up very quickly. So that's all I got.
Julie Kaiser, town manager, been here 8 years, like Peg. It's my 38th year in public service. And grandmother of 2 that are at Miller School.
Thank you.
And I'm from away.
Okay, so I can kind of set out the agenda. Trying to think of some things that we can talk about. First thing I want to get out of this is just a knowledge on you folks, get some knowledge on us, how you guys do business, how we do business. And that's why I thought maybe another month or so, we'll be working pretty hard on our budgets. And obviously, budget's pretty important to both organizations. And again, it's not to point fingers at us or you or me or anyone. It's to find out how we do things. So I thought maybe Peg could give us a brief summary on how we do our budget, and maybe you folks could do the same for us. 'Cause I have no idea. I mean, I've been to some of your final budget meetings. Be kind of curious to see, what are your steps on how it's done. Maybe it'd be beneficial for other people too. Oh, we got another member of the board here.
Eric.
Eric, right?
Yep, thank you. Sorry.
And before we get started, I want to thank you guys for doing the Zoom thing and put it on that's great, because if I can't make the meeting, I'm always watching it just to see what's going on.
So for Waldeboro's budget process, it's happens all year long. 12 months out of the year, Julie's always talking to her department heads and trying to figure out what we need, where we need it, when we need it. And if there's a crucial thing that comes up, it'll be more involved. We'll invite more people. We'll have a budget meeting. We'll have a sit down with the select board and go over what the need might be. Most specifically for capital projects. EMS has evolved also over the last couple of years, so I think EMS is probably the most interesting of the departments as far as changes over the last 4 or 5 years. So we try to stay ahead of it. If we know what's going to happen, we just try to get information together and have a informational meeting. Let's see. So there's that piece, that communication piece with Julie and her department heads, and then we also do like the school does. You guys have a budget calendar. I think it's very similar to what we do here. And we meet about 7 or 8 times, I say, depending on weather, in the spring, similar to, I think the board also does the same thing. And each department head will come to the meeting and talk about what the last 12 months were like for the last fiscal year. Talk about what their staffing levels are like, what their needs might be, if it's equipment, facilities, that sort of thing. And then they'll also come another time to talk about the capital plan, because each department has capital funding for equipment, vehicles, very expensive stuff. So we'll go through that. And then we also will project out. I think the last time we did it during last year was to 2045. And we'll try to figure out how much a fire truck is going to cost in 5 years and how are we going to get there. So
Our differences too, just one of the differences is that we also, aside from the select board, we have a elected budget committee. So it's not just the select board setting, the tone for the budget. It's also a committee of 9 members that are elected at town meeting, and they also serve on that, what we call the budget team.
So then when we get more close to the actual budget, Julie has worked out what each department's needs would be. including capital, even though it's its own fund. And then a book is generated. And it's by fund. And we have information in there by line item. You guys probably do something very similar. And yeah, it just goes by department, by fund, and then capital, again, like I had said, talks about the projections out. What we need, how can we make it work? And then as we go through the budget meetings, we're summarizing, okay, well, if we add up these services and these expenses, what's that gonna do to our budget? And so a lot of times there's a lot of movement, depending on where the board and the budget committee would like, where they would like us to be. Before we come to town meeting.
Yeah, what essentially what happens is those budget meetings starts in what? Late February, early March?
Late February.
9 budget committee members are here, the select board's here, and we're all sitting in a circle similar to this. And the department head standing up there and telling us what he or she needs for the year. And unfortunately, at times, it's, well, what do you think you could do without this year? Because like anyone, I mean, I do the same thing. If I was a department head, I'd go in with everything, anything I can get. And then we may have to cut a little bit, or sometimes we've actually added. When you agree, I mean, we've had department heads come in here thinking they were gonna get a certain level, and they actually came out with more than they initially asked for. Because someone in the budget committee or the select board asked some question or thought of something that maybe emphasized the importance of that item, and we actually may have raised that particular department head budget a little bit.
We also have union contracts with our police and our public works and transfer station, so we try to do our best to know exactly what's gonna happen with wages, but it's one of the things that's not always easy.
So I just want to say to your example that we spent a little bit more money like in our paving fund. We spent an extra $30,000 in our paving fund because we'd get a cheaper price for paving. It was going to save us like $315,000 just by spending an extra $30,000.
And we had that money in our capital, which we didn't initially plan on using this year, this year, right? But it's not like we went and we tried to take money from the taxpayers. We already had it saved for the next couple of years. We actually took it from that line item.
Yeah, if I had to say we had a central issue, it is the extent to which we feel comfortable burdening our property tax base. That's where we get our money from. That's where you get your money from. We're all taking from the same pot. And the two unknowns we don't really have when we're doing the budget is what the county is gonna come in at and what the school district's gonna come in at. That's where it's tough. And I don't know whether you think in terms of where we're sitting. But we do have to think in terms of where you and the county are sitting, because they have a huge impact on the budget. And on the mill rate.
We also go over revenues, look at revenue projections and what we've had and what we think we might have again.
Some of the revenues being like
Excise tax,
Or
I knew it was gonna be over $1 million, and that just seems insane, but it is, and that's not something that the town, we don't, it's not something, it's run by the state, so we get what the state tells us, what we get for registering cars here in Waldeboro. So, it's just interesting to try to fit it all in and try not to be a burden on the taxpayer.
we get excited when people buy new cars in Waldeboro.
We don't say
Yes.
There's been discussion about how we can shift that burden away from the tax base we're all giving to something broader, where it's less onerous on residents in individual towns. And it occurs to me that there might be mandates that you're dealing with. And can't get around and have to tax people to pay for. That we can work with you on. We have a legislator sitting at our table. We have other avenues into state government that could be helpful and useful in dealing with those issues that are beyond our control.
Because you're part of the legislative council, right?
I'm on the LPC.
LBC.
Just want to add one, also part of the revenue piece is, I've heard this a few budget cycles. We don't have an expense problem. We have a revenue problem. Because we don't have a lot of commercial properties that are bringing in income to help offset some of the burden on the taxpayer. So I just thought I'd share that.
Yes, sir.
We have a lot of unfunded mandates, tons of them, because we have this thing in Augusta called the Department of Education, and they come up with the weirdest things that they want our school system to do. And they don't even go to the legislature to get any of that. They just do it. And we have to follow suit. And, you know, that'd be just like me coming and bush hogging Bob Butler's field without him knowing what it's gonna cost. You know, he thinks it's gonna be so much. We think it's gonna be so much, but then we're hit with it.
You still gotta do it.
Still gotta do it regardless. And who's paying? But all of us.
We're here to listen. How do you budget?
Huh?
We're here to listen. How do you budget?
Yeah.
Go ahead
You
with
have
this.
any questions?
But how we do ours, any questions?
Not right now, I don't.
No.
Thanks.
One sec.
Karen,
Yes,
can you provide an overview of our budget process and timeline?
so similar, Peg, I'm looking at the budget all year and we have a finance committee that meets once a month. But as far as the formal budget process, I start about mid-December, preparing all the files for the administrators to use. There's approximately 22 cost centers, so in late December, early January, Steve and I meet with each administrator that either has one or multiple cost centers, so I think it's 12 to 15 meetings, I'm thinking off the top of my head, where we go through, so a cost center being, say, a principal of a school, for example, or special education, so we'll meet with them and we'll go through their budget. Where they're at, what do they think they need for the following year, similar, you know, to what the town does. And then every week, through the month of January and February, during our weekly meeting with those same people, we talk about, you know, try to prioritize amongst all the people, what do they think is the most important thing, because not everyone's gonna get everything they want. And then starting 1st of March is when we start holding the public meetings, and we hold those every Monday for 6 weeks. We put all of this out on the internet. We put the timeline, we put the meeting dates, all the processes that we follow. If anyone's interested, we also
When does that start?
I'm looking at last year's, but last year's was Monday, March 4th,
Okay.
for example,
March
was in the
10th.
first one. We have 6 of them. Sometimes we finish in 5, and the 6th one is the board either approving or not approving the budget, and then we spend that meeting figuring out what to do next. During those 6 meetings, the administrators present their budgets that they went through with Steve and I, and obviously during all this process, I'm finalizing their budgets, making them presentation worthy, putting in what's been agreed on, but then the administrator themselves presents their budget to the board. Which is actually called the Budget Committee, which just happens to be made up of all 16 board members. A lot of school districts have a budget committee that's smaller than their board, but RSU 40s is the entire 16 board members. So we do that for 6 weeks. Then if the board approves it, you know, a book goes out to all the taxpayers in all 5 towns, that gives them all the information, and then we have a public hearing that is in May. And that's when the taxpayers can vote in public on what each article, and then on the budget as a whole. And then in June, the same day that election day is, they vote on it at the ballots. So they have two opportunities, one publicly and one again at the ballots to vote on. So it's a very quick version of a 7-month process that we go through. Steve, I don't know if you have anything, we do, we in the past had given town binders, not something bound together, but an actual binder. And the reason is throughout those 6 weeks, the board will say, no, I don't like that. I'll take it out. So I reprint it and then I hand it all out to them again so they can keep removing stuff and putting new stuff in these big binders. The last few years, most towns have said, yeah, it's online, so I'm fine with that. I don't need to get a binder. I think Friendship in Washington still get these binders. So we try to make it as transparent as possible with everybody. But I'll be completely honest, and I know John's heard this speech before, my very first year, budgeting was a huge thing in the corporate world, right? So my first meeting here, put on my best suit, go to the
Yeah.
board, and the only people there were RSU 40 employees and my husband, and that was it. And we were voting on a $35 million budget. And this last time was the most I've seen in my 5 years, and it was, do you remember, 250, 300, I think? On a almost,
It takes 350, so it was probably.
Extra quote.
200.
and that's on an almost $40 million budget. I have, from the day I walked through the door, I have said, how do we get people to engage in this? I don't want to pass a budget with, the first year, 30 people voted on it publicly. That's not a win, that's a. I don't know.
Out of 5 towns.
Well, that's exactly why it made me think, you know, we gotta see if we can help encourage people to be involved in this, because, you know, you can sit there and complain to us all day long, but go to the meetings. That's why you see, once in a while, you see me pop into a meeting.
Just to give you an idea, on our last budget, 193 people voted in the entire town of Washington. Waldeboro was 1,231 people voted at the polls, but again, only 200 and something for all 5 towns showed up at the public meetings. So.
That's our process in a nutshell.
It feels a little more laborious at the time, just.
I think one of the things that we get the most comments about is that there's not an amount on the actual question. And the question would be, could there be? Is there a way to make that happen? Is there a possibility of that? And I think people, the voting at the public meeting is, people will say, I'm working 2 jobs already, or I have all of this, I can't go to that meeting. It's one meeting at one portion of time. And I think that is what people don't understand. That's what we have a hard time, like and I'll be honest with you, like the change, and Steve and I talked about this, the change that gets made at the public meeting is sometimes different than what's mailed out. So then we had a lot of that that a lot of people questioning that, well, that's not what it said in the mailer. And now there's another $1 million, like, how did that happen? Well, you have to go to the meeting.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think a lot of people have the time or energy, and we spend a lot of the same thing that you do, saying, how do we reach the people and make them more involved? And that's a really hard thing to
Can't
do.
even crack that nut.
I mean, we had a special, given the fact that it's going to be a huge election on November 5th, we had a
It is?
special town forum, kind of informational session about absentee ballots and voting in general. And 3 people from the public showed up. There were more people from the town office at that meeting than there were people who came. But yet we still have people who come in and have questions. It's like, we could have come to our amazing meeting we had. But
One of the things that Pam, our town clerk, has done over the last few elections is developed a voter guide, which I think is awesome, Pam. Do a good job. And I think she did reach out to you guys and added some school information in the June warrant, and I thought that was good. And sometimes I think people just want information.
it's just hard. I think that the not having a number where every other warrant article has a number, it's hard.
We have an explanation for that.
Correct, because the public meeting, the timing of the public meeting and when the towns need their ballots, it's impossible.
Yeah, for printing reasons.
Yeah.
And because you don't know what's gonna get voted in at the public meeting, you can't print ballots. I mean, I could in Washington and Friendship, because I print them literally at the school and I hand them out to but,
Do you,
that's one of the main reasons.
do you remember how frequently we vote on whether to continue the district budget meeting?
I think it's every 3 years.
There's a chance every so many years to revisit whether we have the district budget meeting or you just want to have a vote. So, I mean, maybe that's something to consider the next time that comes around.
What do you mean by that?
Well, right now we have the district budget meeting ahead of the
Right.
the regular
Regular high
vote,
school,
but
yeah.
every so many years we have to ask voters again if they prefer to continue that practice.
They might not understand it.
Right.
I mean, honestly, we
Oh,
would find that a
they're
lot.
pretty
So there may, I guess my
Yeah.
point is, there may be an opportunity there to help inform the community about the impact of having the district budget meeting followed by the vote or not having it. Whatever the options are available under the law.
What does the law dictate with your public hearings and when you finalize your budget? Is there a certain time?
There,
It's a 30-day, it can't be closer than 30 days, as I recall, but I'm off the top of my head, but it's pretty tight from when we finish our meeting. To get the book out, because the book has to be out to the taxpayers no later than 7 days before we hold a public meeting. It's fairly tight, I mean, unless you backed it. If we back it up much further, we're gonna be budgeting for the new school year before we start the current school year, so it's kind of hard. I mean, when I'm working with administrators, they're only 3 years into the current school year. When I'm asking them to say, what do you think you're gonna need next year and the year after and the year after that? But obviously we're willing to do adjustments as we need to get the best information that we can to the tax base. I have a copy, I mean, I'm sure most of you have seen it, but we do send out, and I realize it's not the same as it being on the ballot, but we do send this
Right.
out to all the taxpayers, or all the mailboxes, I should say, it's not just any number of mailbox that tells them what it's going to be. We do put it on the internet as we go along. And also as we finalize them at the end, we put the finalized versions out.
You can send it, doesn't mean they're gonna read it.
Oh, I'm not at all surprised if 1 out of every 10 are read at the most.
I think that's generous.
What are the rules around like having postings at polls or materials to hand out? Like, is it possible to have something printed at the polls that has the budget amount?
Oh, that is required. They have them posted when we
But-
hand them.
We did last year.
Then, I mean, why isn't it accessed that people are still asking? Well, I just voted for something and I don't know what the amount is if it's there.
It's not in the
Uneducated
books.
people.
That's a wonderful question.
Right.
I think it's the fact that it's not written right on the warrant and that things can be changed from the time there's the book and the public hearing can change things. It's like I said, we go through the same issue of how do you make people look at it and read it and want to. I've already had many people texting me, hey, what does this mean? I'm like, did you look at our voting guide online? You know, already for this coming, the 4 questions we have or 5 questions we have for this. So I think sometimes it's just they don't look at it.
Might as well delve into the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that's the capital budget. You obviously have to buy school buses, that's part of your capital program. How do you capitalize, how do you fund, or how do you plan to fund repairs to the schools in the next several years?
Again, I'm Brian Rice. I'm the Facilities and Transportation Director. Some of you were here a couple of years ago when I presented to the Select Board for a bond of $80 million for capital improvements. That was kind of the culmination of 18 months worth of work between me, 3 engineering firms, and an architecture firm. Since that bond failed, we have continued to engage with Energy Efficiency Investments, who is an energy savings company in educational parlance, and we have a requirement to align ourselves with one of these companies anytime that we're undertaking an energy savings project. And they're there to ensure that we're getting our money's worth, is basically what they do. So we continue to have evaluations of our systems. We've got, I've had 3 different engineering, depending on their criteria, their specific expertise in the district over the last 3 months, trying to narrow down where we want to, where we need to prioritize our monies. Obviously, we got a septic system at Madomic Valley High School. That's the big one in the room. Problem is Madomic Valley High School is sitting on a whole bunch of sensitive habitat. So finding a location to put that septic system is one of the big questions. And so we've been bringing in a number of companies to talk to us about that. And then along the way, we're also looking at projects that we can do to tie together with that in a performance contract that would help, eat up some of the cost of that septic system. So it's an ongoing process, and frankly, sometimes the priorities are created for us. Water, now the big thing is air and water quality. We just got notified we have a requirement by, I think, December of 2025 to do air and water quality at all of our schools. And with all the things that they're looking to test, from talking to a couple of companies, we're looking at $30,000 to $50,000 per school for the testing to be done. Well, that all of a sudden becomes a priority because I've now got about a year to execute that. And by the way, the best time to do that is in the fall. So we've missed this. It's a little late to do it now. And then things like Madomic Middle School and the water system failed on us. Then all of a sudden that becomes. So I wish I could tell you that I have a plan going ahead, or rather we all have a plan, but we're not there yet. We certainly have a priority list. Many of you have seen it. We continue to work away at it and pick away at it. This summer, we were able to get a new roof on Union Elementary School, and the domestic hot water at Union Elementary School that represented 2 out of the top 4 on our priority list in the district. Next summer, we're looking to do the septic system, which would then take 3 out of the top 4 on the priority list. And then from there, we'll continue to plug away at it.
We have applied to this, can you remind me of the term?
Capital construction.
Thank you. They've toured Miller and the high school with Brian, Steve, and the principals. Last time, it's done every 7 years, Brian?
Every 8 years.
And the last time we were 50-something of a list of 70-something schools, of which only 9 were approved and only half of them have been built this far. This time they got, I think, just shy of 100 applications. So 25 more than last time. And what did I say, we were 50-something for the high school. We threw Miller on this year. We won't know until April, June.
And they'll release the list.
And, the state pays for a large portion, but it still has local tax base.
If I could step back a little bit and talk about how the town does it. The town votes on almost every line item, every department line item in the budget, and on very specific capital projects on our ballot. I dare say that if RSU 40 put an assessment for rebuilding the septic system at the high school on the ballot, it would pass, and it probably would be 80-20. Despite it's going to be a couple of $1 million whenever you get it designed. Is that something that you are capable of doing, is have a line item budget or a line item ballot rather, reflecting those various capital programs?
I don't know the answer to that. You know?
We added this past year capital improvement line to our articles. And we transferred $1 million from our fund balance to that capital improvement. As I understand it, I hate to speak without having reviewed it, but I want to say the attorney said they can be specific, but they can also just say capital improvement. But I'd have to look that back up again. There are some schools, districts who have them rather specific, like special purpose private school capital fund that they set aside in case a student goes to special purpose private school and they didn't have on their list. For those of you who don't know, that's upwards of $100,000 per child. So if you get one you're not expecting, it can become very expensive. So we did move $1 million in there, and that's because it's going to breach over school years. We needed to put it into a fund that we can access that doesn't go away when the budget goes away, so to speak. So we are looking at that.
Well, I do remember, all years my brain is now, when we first came here, that there were budgets that had categories or ballots that had categories on them. I remember so much for administration, so much for teaching, so much for transportation. Danny remembers that.
Correct.
too.
And it still does that.
Yeah,
It
there's
just-
an article.
Just,
Um,
it's in the book that goes out.
So during the public meeting, you can vote on articles.
Right.
Then when you go to the
When you go to
polls, you vote on the
polls,
ballot
it's
and the
not there.
totality. Correct.
Mike, are you suggesting that if there was a line item for the capital, that people could say, okay, the septic's important, HVAC is important,
Air testing and quality.
air testing and quality is important. Like, if there was almost like a ranked choice voting or something, are you saying that just for that portion of the budget?
Just
When you had
just for
special
capital. I mean,
projects.
people,
I don't know.
people really, my ears were ringing. People didn't know what $81 million was gonna buy. And yeah, if they had went to the board meetings, they would have heard, but nobody goes to the board meetings. And I don't know, there's probably 10,000 people. That room isn't gonna hold 10,000 people. It's probably, I don't know, 7,000 or 8,000 voters. It's not, your room isn't gonna hold 8,000 voters. But if it was on the ballot and they knew what they were getting, I think they would say yes. I really do. I honestly do believe that they would say yes to a septic system and to air test. It seems,
That air testing that you were talking about, Brian, that's being pushed down by the state,
Correct.
state DOE? DOE?
I believe that's the case. I would have to check with our.
Now, the ones that
our air
are
quality.
unfunded.
We just had some testing done over at
Yeah.
Warren.
Yeah.
We had some concerns with some mold, but we had some testing done. And that, he hit me with that while we were scheduling the rest of the schools for the year to do air quality testing on. This is radon specific. That's what they specifically, radon and a couple of other ones that I didn't understand what he was using. Big long words, so, but radon's a big one.
And PFAS has been added just so you
PFAS
and I.
PFAS is huge.
That was what, 3 years ago.
Yeah,
maybe they
PFAS
added
is
that.
primarily the water testing that we're doing, that we have to do.
We did
That's a
lead.
whole nother big financed requirement, lead and water testing. I think last year we spent upwards of $20,000 or $30,000 on water testing that we didn't know we had to do until we were into the school year, when the budget had already been finalized.
We legislated that.
Thank you. Can I ask?
Stand on some desks.
Yes, Bob.
Is there no room for appeal when you get instructions like this from on high? There's no way of saying, hey, you guys, you're not down here with us. You don't understand the situation. We've been, I don't know what the case might be, but you're certainly closer to what's going on than they are. And they're handling a lot more schools than just yours. So I can't believe there's not some kind of appeal procedure in place that allows you to go back and at least argue your point.
I think it's very similar to like the testing that we do at the landfill. We don't the DEP prescribes. They added PFAS testing.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same thing. You're told
Engineering, they tell you what you're doing.
they have to.
Well, I'm speaking generally here, not specifically.
Yeah, the PFAS and the lead and water testing came down. That's federal. Those are federal mandates. The radon testing, I don't believe that was a federal mandate. I think I think this is a state mandate.
Now, I know, I would assume, well, I'm pretty sure Medon Valley and the middle school are not on town water. So you guys must test all the time anyways. I mean, even with my business, if I was on my own well, every month I'd have to test.
Well,
So I mean, you guys must be doing the same thing.
so there are testings that we do monthly. Not just at Medon Valley High School, Medon Middle School, but also Prescott, Union, and I'm missing one. No, that's it. That's four, because we got three on public water.
Right, so
but it
you shouldn't
doesn't
have to
get
do
into-
any of that.
But
on
it's not,
public water.
it doesn't dive into the lead,
Right.
the PFAS, all that. That's a whole different level of testing.
They're
That they
additional.
have to send those out to a whole different lab for those testings. Challenges.
One of the challenges we face in this is we go through our budget process, as Karen explained, March to June by the time voters vote on it. And the new legislation typically goes into effect in October. So it's after our budget's been approved that we're responding to new requirements and trying to figure out a way to pay for it if it involves costs. So that's something maybe we could talk about at some point.
I think that should be in your budget,
It would
testing
be-
for this stuff to make sure.
Yeah, well, what I was
With
getting
your
at, though-
monthly water sample.
Yeah, but what he's saying is,
I
we've already
understand.
set the budget and they.
Oh, I know
they bring
that.
up new
The timing, if it
New
could go into
warrant.
effect at the start of the next fiscal year, then it would give us a chance to plan for it. And
Right.
if we
Yep.
need to,
Yep.
include it in budget planning for the next year.
Who do we go to? On high to work on this?
I don't know the answer to that. We've been
Well,
talking about that for
Bob
10
could
years.
take it to the
anyway.
LPC.
It hasn't changed yet.
LPC.
Like, just an example of the legislation that was passed in October, we heard about it, we knew about it, we didn't know what it was gonna end up on. But it went through to pay school support staff more than minimum, certain percentage more than minimum wage, then, so a custodian at a school would make more than, say, a custodian at a hospital in theory, based on this. Originally, they were talking 150%, I think, of minimum wage when it first came out. It ended up being settled at 125 for educational technicians and 115% for all of the support staff. So even though we have a collective bargaining agreement and we have the salary set, by next school year, we have to add that in. We don't get a choice. We didn't vote. Well, I suppose we, I don't know. But so it is what it is. But so in our case, we were fortunate that a very, very small subset of people weren't already there. But if they hadn't been, I don't know what we would have done with that. So this year, the book was only this thick when we went to the legislative, but the year before it was like this thick of all the things that added in. I don't know why they can't sync it up with a fiscal year of municipality and school, but they don't sync it up. So we just kind of cross our fingers.
Part of that problem is that not all the school districts are on the same fiscal year. They are on different fiscal years, aren't they? Or
Here
are
in
they-
Maine, I believe they're all on the
Every-
same
every
fiscal
one of them?
year.
Yeah.
I can't speak to other states, but
Okay.
here in Maine,
It's the towns that aren't on the same.
Towns
fiscal
And
year.
the towns that are different.
yeah, I think Washington and.
So there
Friendship
really is
are
no
different.
excuse for that asynchronicity there. They should,
You would think.
you think, yeah.
So we look at trends for the unknown and if it's something we've already budgeted for, we'll budget an additional to anticipate a 6% increase in health insurance, for example.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
We try, we budget at a certain percentage of health insurance and then I hope that the actual comes in from the state before we finalize the budget so that I can adjust it back. I try to go high, so when it actually comes in, it looks better than I bring it down.
Feels better.
Yeah, it feels
Feel
better
better.
anyway, right? So we do those things, you know, we do a collective bargaining agreement each year, because we have 3 different groups, so every year we're negotiating with one of those 3 groups. So those wages are locked in for 3 years at a time, in each of those 3 groups.
Does the school have a fund balance policy?
The state has a fund balance policy for us. So it was 3%. During COVID, they moved it up to 9, and they're moving it down to 5%.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Percentage of our budget. So we could, originally, we could only have 3% in a fund balance. During COVID, they moved it up so you could, a school could have 9%, and now they're moving it down to 5%, and I think it's either next fiscal year or the fiscal year after that it's down to 5%. But just to be clear, I don't know about Steve's tenure, but there hasn't been a fund balance in RSU 40 until the last 3 or 4 years, Steve. In fact, I think it was in the hole at one point. Yeah. So.
We're not any.
How does that work? If the state, if say you've got a 10% fund balance, the state will only allow you to keep 5%. Does that get rolled over into the next budget? What happens to that?
You cannot spend more than what the taxpayers have approved in a given year. So we cannot spend that fund balance if it's not part of the next year's voted budget. The only caveat is, like I said, we moved $1 million into a capital reserve fund in case to try to start working on the septic, that we can, but anything else we cannot. So the fund balance sits there. The only way we could spend it if something catastrophic happened, we would have to go to all 5 towns and hold an election.
So the school district doesn't refund any of that fund balance to the towns, though. It just goes into a different account that you can't spend.
I went back and looked, and there was, I guess it actually wasn't a fund balance. It was additional monies that came in on the ED 279, which is the money we get from the state. More money came in after the budget was finalized, and we reduced the town's tax burden that year. And the other year that it happened, and I only looked back 15 years, I think. The other year, we used it to pay off the negative fund balance.
Does RSU 40 utilize any special accounts? So is RSU 40 utilizing a special ed account that you can shelter some money in?
Like I said, we can do the reserve accounts. We've never had any in the past. This year, we created one for the first time, which was the capital reserve, and moved $1 million into that.
Because you really should be having one of those for, I would think, for special ed, for transportation, and for capital. I mean, those are the 3 that the state allows you to have, and it would make sense if taxpayers understood what those funds were for. Would put you in a position where you don't have to go to taxpayers for some unforeseen.
Keep in mind, we never had any extra money up until the last
Yeah.
couple of years.
Yeah, no, I-
So we didn't have any money to move anywhere and put into any reserve for anything.
No, but
In
it should be a
fact,
line item on your, in your actual budget. It shouldn't be, well, if it's left over, we'll put it over there. It should be, we need to put X number of dollars annually into this account. And this is the reason that we need to do it.
Well, I don't disagree with that. Every year, the taxpayers say we're asking for too much in our budget. So then if we start saying, not only do we want what we need this year, we want more for the next future years. As an accountant, I completely get it, but how do I say to you, you're not able to pay your bills, but by the way, we got a savings account,
It's a tough one.
right? I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but it is. It's like, there are people here who can't pay their electricity, and I'm gonna tell them that we have a savings account at RSU 40, just in case something happens. I think we need to have one. I think we must have one.
I
But
don't think it's just
don't-
in case something happens. It's not different than owning your home and knowing that in 20 years, the roof needs to be replaced. And therefore, I should be squirreling away $1,000 a year so that when my roof needs to be replaced, I don't have to go get a HELOC and replace my roof. I actually have anticipated that, just like you anticipate for your car, you're gonna need tires every 2 years. So you need $1,400 set aside, and you shouldn't stick that on your credit card. I think we get into this situation where we're not educating taxpayers about what the future needs are going to be. And then we come forward and say we need $81 million but there's no real great detail on what that means. And then people go, whoa, no, absolutely not. But if we're saying, hey, we need X number of dollars annually for the next 10 years, and these are the projects those things are gonna cover. And there's a bit in there for, suddenly a roof is leaking, a septic system fails. We no longer have water in a school system. We're gonna be able to cover that without coming back and asking for more.
Like we do with our capital.
Well,
I mean,
I
yeah,
don't really want to talk about the bond, but I would like to say that it was a lot of detail about what made up the 81 million. We had it listed out in great detail. We did 7 tours of the schools and we held meetings. So I just want to be clear on that, and I don't disagree with anything you say as far as savings account. I have 5 years of history with RSU 40. I can't make up for the first 45 years of why we didn't have anything in place to stop us from getting where we are today. And we're here now. So what we should have, could have done isn't going to help us to get to where we need to be in the future. And we just need to figure out how to get there. And I don't know, as long as we have 7 roofs, 7 boilers, 7 lawns, 7 septics, or town water, or whatever we have 7 of everything. It's expensive, so.
How does the RSU 40 board plan to address this? This is really your job to decide whether you want these accounts, whether you want a line item ballot for the voters to vote on. This is your task.
Well, we'll let them, we're not gonna talk about that tonight. Let's move on. We've got enough budgeting. Staffing and, what I put down, staffing, shortfall of talent. You can tell us the shortfall of talent we have here.
So, it's an issue for us, just like I'm sure it is for you, for staffing. CDL drivers right now are premium. We may be almost at full.
You got some extra ones, we can use them.
Well, I've heard that a lot. A lot of people, a lot of taxpayers have come in recently about why can't Public Works drive the school buses? And trying to explain that it's a different endorsement and that,
Johnny Day on the school bus.
John Day, I'd be great on a school bus, but I mean, great, but I love the fact that people are thinking outside the box, but I just, I was like, good idea, but if they're, that's just a lot, but, so CDL drivers are a, hot commodity, police officers and medics. Obviously, and when it comes to police officers and medics, it's a highly, as with CDL drivers, it's a highly competitive market right now. So we face the staffing challenges of there's only so many certified people in those positions, and they can pretty much set their pay rate. So we tend to, all the towns, and town managers and I talk about this quite a bit, is we're all stealing from each other. I noticed you just stole a bus driver from someplace.
Yeah, well, and it's not just in between districts. I mean, it's within departments of RSU 40.
Oh, okay.
We're cannibalizing from within.
Oh, okay, you're,
So,
I see you driving vans.
yeah, I
Shame.
actually, I thought it was that you stole from someplace else. But it was interesting because, we faced those same things just like you face with bus drivers and things like that. So it's just, it's hard. And sometimes, we'll think we've got it and then we don't, we've been waiting for somebody from the military to come who we made an offer of employment to from, the military for our police department, and we've had to wait now. It's been pushed off twice. We had 2 candidates that could not find from out of state that would have fit beautifully in our department, but they couldn't find housing for their families. So there's just a lot that goes with all of it. So that's where we are. We did hire somebody in the town office, and that was we had a great candidate pool for that. We wish the candidate pool for that was what it was for police, EMS, and for Public Works.
think we're in a similar place in terms of staffing. Although I will say this year has been better than it has been. It was especially challenging coming off of COVID. We currently have, I think, 15 vacancies across the district, including 5 teaching positions, 7 ed tech positions, and 2 bus drivers. So, we fill positions with substitutes when we can, and it makes sense to do so. And in some of those positions, we have people who are working towards certification requirements, and at some point, we hope to be able to hire them to fill those positions, but it continues to be a challenge. We finished last school year with 20, I don't remember the exact number, in the low 20s vacant positions we couldn't fill for the year. Like I said, it's been better this year. We've had less staff turnover this year, and we have fewer overall vacancies with that. But it definitely remains a challenge. There are just more positions available than there are people that are interested and qualified and applying for those positions.
You find that aging out, the teachers or the educators are aging
Yeah,
out?
absolutely. The workforce continues to shrink.
Obviously, there's an old, Lincoln County being the oldest county in the state, Maine being the oldest state as far as.
Yeah, as baby boomers work their way out of the
Yeah.
workforce, it's the number of people, the workforce continues to shrink. And then I just think that was further disrupted by COVID.
Right.
So, I think, we've seen some rebound since COVID. People have come back, but not as much. I want to say before COVID, we had small applicant pools for positions, but generally we could fill positions. Now, in some cases, we have no applicants for positions, and positions remain vacant.
Are you competing with the larger towns? You know, for more money?
Well, we try to.
And are you a feeder ultimately to them because they poach on your staff?
It varies a little bit. We're better than we have been, but I wouldn't say, we're certainly not leading the pack. We're not in the top quartile, but
At the end either though.
no, we're somewhere in the middle by now. And it depends whether you're looking at teachers or support staff, different positions. We're doing better in that area, but wages and benefits make up 80% of our budget. It's almost all of it. And so, how much we pay our staff matters a lot in terms of our ability to attract and retain staff, but also in terms of the impact that it has on our budget. It's a significant challenge for us.
Danny, you had something?
Putting Karen on the spot here. Going over the bus situation. At the board meeting last week, you mentioned how like years ago you had so many substitutes and so many bus runs, and now it's less bus runs and no substitutes. Can you?
Right, so we only have 2 vacant bus driver positions right now, but that's in part because we collapsed 2 bus routes. So, it just became to the point where leaving those positions as vacancy just didn't make sense. And we run Friendship as one, and that driver is actually the lead custodian. So he drives to Friendship in the morning, does his custodial work, then he does Friendship in the afternoon, and the high school kids too, live in Friendship. So we would actually have more vacancies, but we just decided, we collapsed to run a union. So unfortunately, the students are on the buses a little bit longer, but they're getting to school versus just keeping that open. I would say I've only lived up here for 5 years, but for the last 2 or 3 years when I worked in Portland, I was short-staffed always. I never could get to fully staffed, and I just think it's the baby boomers aging out, and it's working its way up to state. I don't see it getting better. I think we're gonna have to figure out how to work with less people. Right, I mean, to speak to what John said, Brian drives almost daily, probably close to daily. We had 2 maintenance people driving almost daily. We have one of our mechanics is a bus aide. I mean, we're doing what we feel we must in order to keep the children safe. And we can't educate them if we can't get them to school. So we're doing what we can, but it's not ideal, for sure. But I do think, because I do most of the negotiation, or I participate in them, we have made ground with paying better than say 10 years ago. We're at least an average. And some of our ed techs are actually paid better than some of the districts around us, and our bus drivers are some of the best paid. But we're still short, because they're just not there, you know, and it's still, even though it's not half-time, it's part-time job. You don't work in the summer, you don't work on vacations. And it's 6 to 7 hours a day, and it's a very clunky day, because you start at 5 in the morning, you stop for a while at 9, you don't go back to work till 1 o'clock, so you know, it's time in the middle. So we continue, and Brian, have you ever been fully staffed on the custodial side?
Oh, and over the last 5 years, a couple of times, but
Sure.
not very long, not from a couple of weeks.
Reason I want to bring this up is because, you know, sometimes maybe we're talking to people, hey, go apply to the RSU, you know, they look at me, how many people say, oh, we don't have a job, there's no jobs, of course there's
Yeah.
jobs, don't tell me there's no.
All the
Don't
information-
Jobs
tell
everywhere.
me there's no
All
jobs.
the information is right on our website. We'd love to talk to anyone who's interested, and we can help them navigate the process.
And I can't speak enough to the insurance. I mean, I know it's not money in your pocket, but it's not money out of your pocket.
Well, I will tell you, that's the hardest thing we've had, is we've actually had people we've fired who are like, can I give up my health insurance? They don't want the health insurance, they want the hourly rate. And, you know, I don't think they fully grasp that benefit.
You're under.
They don't think they're ever
You're-
gonna need it.
Right. No, you
Well,
don't
I'll
think
tell
they're
you,
gonna need
we're
it.
all gonna need it.
Right. But that's one of the things that we have to compete with and try to say is, hey, you know, this benefit is worth X amount of dollars, and it will mean something to you someday. I know you really want, well, give me that money in my paycheck.
Now spend it
And then we
yesterday.
try to explain, we have to have health coverage. You can't not have health coverage, so it's been interesting.
And I think earlier this year, I think people were sick, we didn't have some bus runs at the high
Oh,
school, so
yes,
kids.
so I didn't fully answer your question. So I went back and just looked kind of historically at prior business manager reports before I started working there. And when we opened, I think it was school year 17, we had all 22 bus runs, plus 5 substitute bus drivers. We have none. We have no substitute bus drivers. So, and our bus drivers, you know, get sick. Everyone gets sick, and we have nobody now, so we cancel bus trips. Brian
And also the pool that we draw from, when somebody does get sick, everybody's drawing from the same pool, which is loose transportation, country, coach, a couple of the other ones to grab buses. And so, for a student, so they're not available either to cover runs.
So if somebody was to be a bus driver, they'd have to do all the routes. They couldn't just say, hey, I'm only available to do like the Miller run. They'd have to be available to do all.
Correct.
So,
A sub, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So what we try to do, or Brian does.
With that said, though, if somebody wants to drive a van, and they only want to do an elementary run, that's where we have our problems with vans. It's not the high school, middle school, it's getting the elementary kids.
And you need that school bus certification on your.
No, that's just for a van driver, that's your Class C license only.
We have a lot of students that must be transported by van, so we have
other people looking for some part-time vans.
And then just one last thing on that. So when they go to lose, that costs more. So what'd you say?
Oh, for the substitute, yeah.
It costs a lot.
and they're having a hard time staying staffed themselves, so they do the best they can, they help us when they can.
Next topic, what can we do to help you? Where can we work together to? Are there any assets that we have that make?
Driver.
Yeah, you got that license. Huh? Just get
I'm
a. just-
retired again. I'm on my third retirement. I don't know if there's something the town can do to. We can kind of work together. I was talking with our EMS chief and he told me I could speak on his behalf. If you folks need anyone to teach CPR, first aid, that type of classes, free of charge, talk to him.
Oh, that's good to know.
I'm sure you guys said, you probably use your RN, your nurses up there to teach some of those classes, but Derek said he'd be glad to. Yes.
Non-monetary value, just talking up the district and, when people have questions, when people are complaining about the district, just talking about, what we've said tonight, the
Yeah.
struggles that we have and what we're trying to do. Because I think a lot of it is just community trust and value and, improving that, it will go a long way. Because then when ballot measures are there, people will vote for them and, improve schools and environments for kids.
Encourage them to call, meet with us. I know
Yeah.
Julie and I
Me
talked
too.
about this, yeah, and with the tax bills, the contact information with questions about it, my phone is not ringing off the hook, to be honest with you, but I think it's at least an effort to, get my name and phone number out there. If somebody's interested in talking with us about it, we'd be happy to talk with them.
On election day, if you're not doing anything, if any of the board members would like to come sit outside, you're more than welcome to come sit in the hallway and you can engage with some of our taxpayers who are going to be paying their taxes that day, because that's typically a heavy day of unhappiness. So where, we get the brunt of the unhappiness. So anybody wants to come and sit.
So if we did that, we should probably vote first before we.
Yeah, vote first. I mean, even if you just wanted to hang out in the office and just listen to some of the comments, I mean, I think that's the hardest thing for this, the people who are on the front lines, and Pam's one of those people, and Rose and Christine and me, they get the brunt of it. Then I'll hear it, I'll walk out, and then everybody's demeanor changes. Because then it's like, ooh, and people are hurting, and when people are hurting and they get very upset, and it becomes nobody understands or nobody listens. And when I try to tell them, well, you could call the school, that's not going to do any good. That's just the answer that comes out of people's mouths. And I'm not saying that's the case. They don't feel heard. And I don't know, like you said, we try to put as much information out there. I think you have to meet people where they are, and people don't want to drive to Union and come to your office. It's much easier to come to the Waldeboro town office and say something. They don't want to, pick up a phone because they don't know you, but they know us, so they're going to come in and give it to us. So that's a hard part. So we can even say, hey, you should call. And unfortunately, I've said that a lot. And if you haven't gotten any calls, that's discouraging to me, because people aren't reaching out and saying something. So, yeah, so anybody's always more than welcome to come and on election day and sit and chat or, answer questions.
So late in the game,
But I think even if people just feel like they're heard.
Yeah.
I think that's most of it is they just want everybody to be aware that, and I think one of the things the select board did this year with the budget committee, and believe me, that was a hot debate about using fund balance to offset the increase that we knew was coming on some little way. That was hotly debated between both the select board and the budget committee, and in the end, they decided to utilize fund balance. But part of that is, I think people appreciate that, but they're worried about what happens next year. We have, just to give you an example, we put on the back this year of the tax bills, the tax club. So I just asked our tax collector before I came in, I'm like, hey, where are we at? And she said, we're at about 100 applications for tax club, which spreads that tax bill out over, 9 months or 8 months. Typically we run about 40, we have 100 new applications.
Just because people didn't really know about it.
And I think that people are just having a hard time. So, and I think this year was complicated too, because people who had the tax stabilization last year, they don't get that this year. You have to apply for it in your income tax. So they're not gonna see that tax relief until they file their income tax. So they get this tax bill, so it's the difference from the increase from last year to this year. And they're not gonna see that relief until March. When they file.
Public relations. How about, is there anything that we can do as like buying power?
The only
I
things,
mean, like, I
yeah,
was thinking like your bus, you guys do your own tires, I'm a truck driver by trade, CDL guy. You guys do your own tires? We do. I mean, purchasing tires, can
we
we,
do our own tires now.
but if we buy them in bulk, you're getting better pricing on, tires aren't cheap.
No, they're very
We buy a lot as it
Yeah.
is, so I don't know how many
Yeah.
you guys do, but we buy several hundred tires a year, so.
About the same.
About the same.
I was just thinking that sometimes you buy more stuff, you get better
No,
deals.
great.
Well, if there's anything you can think of, Steve and I have talked about this in the past, but we can buy together, that would save.
I remember we used to buy paper a long time ago. I don't know what are we doing anymore?
We get it at the state rate, WB Mason, the state has the cut rate and I can't get it any cheaper anywhere else. So that's, I'm paying $36 a box for it.
It's the one I remember.
I know we're kind of peeling the onion back here, but trying to think outside the box.
I just think one of the initial things you said, which is getting people involved, and I don't know how to do that, or getting even people, you know, you say they don't wanna drive, I get it. But all the information about the school budget by cost centers on the internet. Now we have our stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
We might be up to a couple hundred views now and then. It's, to me, still is a very small number of people.
Who got Facebook?
And
That way your complainers, where are your complainers?
well, that's what I was gonna say. So like Brian puts his phone number everywhere. I don't know if you have it like on billboard yet, but I mean, he puts it everywhere.
Bathroom wall.
Yeah, that was from before. But, you know, he will put on anything like, you know, cancel the bus route. Please call me if you can't get your child to school. We will get somebody there. And instead of calling
It's on
Brian,
Facebook.
you'll find on Facebook something. And, you know, so Brian will reach out to that person. They don't want to talk then. They just want to do something on
That's,
social media.
that is exactly what happens here.
You
Is
can't
To the
fix it.
fake
You won't
news.
engage.
you
Facebook, the
can't-
fake
you can't-
news.
But many, there are many people who really value that information who don't say a word.
Like, I didn't know half the problem you were having with your transportation until I started on Facebook and I said, I don't want to be that guy. Then I see you driving a van the next day.
Idle hands and all,
He
right?
does facilities,
Keeps them on.
many hats.
But it's
If we don't have our ballots printed, but have you print them, is it possible to get the number on?
Actually, that's why I was looking in my email when, I can't remember if it was Tiger Julie that asked a question about it. I was looking at what, the attorney told me, so he said the BVR ballot cannot include any detail about the budget because of the timing of preparing the ballots and also because the statutes require a specific form of questions. So it goes, I mean, it's long, but it goes on to say that basically it cannot have the, and I can send this to you, maybe you can distribute it out. So
that'd be great.
it doesn't matter, basically. When we do it, we can't. But it is put up at the town halls, right? And it's put up at the voting booths, but it can't be on the ballot itself. And the other question you asked was, it's 45 days is the furthest from the public meeting to the voting. That's the furthest. All right. So.
And then there's that 3-year thing Steve brought up that we could educate the public on.
And just, this is really related to this meeting, but we did, had been meeting in you and the board voted at the last meeting to start holding our board meetings at the middle school. So that'll be closed for some people.
Have lots of people at our next meeting, right?
You never know.
This is
I
the
know.
most we ever have.
There's almost always 16.
It depends on the topic.
Yeah, we don't get huge crowds at select board meetings.
Oh, we used to.
Well, anyone have any parting shots?
It was going good until now, John.
Well, I have something I will say, and it's a compliment. I have a preschooler and a first grader that started in Miller. My daughter moved to town and they come home every day thrilled and happy and really, really enjoying themselves. And they have they were in Montessori and everybody was very concerned about how they were going to adapt to public school, and they've done well. And like I said, you know, when my husband gets them off the bus, they are just happy and can't wait to tell everybody about the day they've had, so.
Thanks for sharing that, Julie. I'll make sure I let Julia know.
So for your side, that's one for our side. I was involved in an accident in Warren last Thursday. I do have a broken rib, but Waldeboro EMS come picked me up, dug me out of the truck and loaded me in the ambulance and took me to the hospital. And they done a marvelous job. And the nurse says to me in the emergency room after EMS had left, I wonder if this IV's gonna work. And she says, it does. Who put that in? So we have a good, I know it costs money, everything costs money, but I couldn't have been taken care of any better than by our EMS staff.
They are wonderful.
Are you up to some sort of discount for frequency?
I ought to get a discount, but no, the insurance company called me today and wanted to know, send the bills to them.
I'm surprised they didn't look at him and move on to the next person.
Which rib was that?
Huh?
Which rib was
do.
that?
I'm not telling you.
Well, if no one has anything else, we've been here just about an hour and a half, and I want to thank everyone for coming. Hopefully it was
Thank you.
informative, informational,
And if you guys figure out how to get people involved in the budget process,
and yeah, let us
let
know.
us know.
Let us know.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
It's nice to put faces to names. That way everybody knows where everybody is.
I know Leah's face because in the video, they got right on your camera.
Yeah, the whole time.
I know.
Whole time is on.
Like, what faces might I be making?
Yeah, it's true. They do. They have it on.
90% of the time,